What's up everyone, and welcome back to another Path of Exile 2 market analysis video. So today we want to discuss a few correlations between the player count and also newer patch notes, and then how these things influence the relative value, so the value at which a currency trades at in comparison to everything else inside the game, of all of the currency inside the game. So to do that, we'll be looking at a lot of complicated data and some things that might spark a lot of questions. So always go ahead and ask those questions in the comment section, or simply join our Discord server in the video description, where you'll find a lot of explanation and also some systems that might help you on making a lot of divines. So let's get started with the video. So the first thing that we really want to get a hang of is that currency inside the game, like the divine orb and all of the basic currency that you can see under the currency tab, which is quite easily separated from everything else, right? It's already organized. Anything that you can see right here is currency that drops for the casual player. That means that that currency is dependent on how many people play the game. If less people play the game, these currencies are going to be more valuable. And if more people play the game, these currencies are going to be less valuable. And I say more valuable and less valuable because we are looking at the difference between these currencies and all of the other currencies. Since that is the way in which you'll be making the most profit, right? Any currency that is more valuable than the divine orb, like for example, let's take any of these omens right here, is going to be, let's put it in context to the divine orb, is going to be trading at a certain market ratio. And if we know when the divine orb, which I just mentioned is one of those basic currencies, if we know when the divine orb will be de-evaluating, then we also know that the prices for this omen will be increasing. Since one divine orb is now less valuable, you'll have to pay more for this currency. And that is because the basic currency is something that drops for everyone, and to effectively get any of the omens, you'll have to have a very good tower setup and also have to do specific maps, right? The divine orb drops anytime in any map that you do, as well as rituals, of course. And the ritual omens, they only drop in rituals. You won't get any ritual omens from not doing rituals. Makes sense, right? So from there, we can now figure that if we reverse those circumstances, right, and we say that there's less players, that means that the divine orb is more valuable and this currency is going to be less valuable. So the more players that are playing the game, the less this currency is going to be, or the more this currency is going to be worth in comparison to divine orbs, right? You'll have to pay more divine orbs, and the less players we got, the less this currency will be worth in comparison to divine orbs, because there are then also less divine orbs on the market. Of course, these things, they kind of take some time and are not immediate, as of course it takes some time unless the existing trading volume diminishes in the currency market, right? Because someone has to use these omens on items, someone has to use the already farmed divines on items, and that means that there is some separation between the point at which a player base drops and also the price of any of these omens drop. And to really get to know when these kind of drops happen, we'll have to look at the divine orb in context to currencies that drop even more often. And that is either the exalted orb or the chaos orb. Though I would recommend that you use the exalted orb, because the exalted orb even drops in something like the campaign. And if we can see that the trading volume for the exalted orb is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's reaching even something like a high, right? That means that there is already more players or more of that currency in the market. And from there, it's basically just figuring out when exactly the divine orb or the omens hit their lowest or hit their highest. And then you simply invest into the omens when they are at their lowest, right? So that when the divine orb is at its highest, or when the omens are at the highest, you want to exchange for divine orb because the divine orb is at its lowest. And to do that, we'll be looking at this data right here. So we got some more things to discuss considering patch notes, and also some other things that I want to explain on the prices. But I want to quickly go over what we can see in the data that is reflecting what I just said, right? So we can look at it in more detail and visualize it a bit. And this data that you can see right here, which is by the way also accessible through our Discord server, or simply the link that you can also find in the video description. This data is showing us the short-term value developments of the currency, and this data is showing us the long-term developments of all of the currency. That is noted down in this data right here, right? It's not all of the currency, but it's a lot of the currency. And if we look a bit closer, we can see that in the last couple of days, we've had some big volatility considering the omens and considering some of the currency. But the most notable currency that I want to point out, or currencies, is, if we zoom in a bit, the black line that you can see right here, which is the mirror price, absolutely skyrocketing in its relative value increase, as well as the divine orb. And that is because these two currencies are simply very, very rare, and if we have less players, we'll have less of that currency. So that is kind of a prime time to invest into any of the omens. The only worry where we'll have to kind of watch out for is that we don't want to be caught up in a very, very high demand time for any of the omens. And we can see that by simply looking at how many of these bellies a currency recently had, because those bellies are value decreases. And if we look at one of the currencies that might have had that, it would be the Omen of Sinistral Null. Though it had one high recently, and we wanted to drop a bit more, and then we'll buy some, and we'll expect it to go up in price again. So that's basically the strategy implemented on these graphs. And if we now go a bit more into detail on what patch note circumstances we are in right now, we are kind of at the point where the league is very slowly but surely diminishing in player count. I'll pull that up real quick. POE2 SteamDB, and when we look at it, we can see that right here we got only 16,000 players at the time. So if we look at at the charts that don't work right now, I think this is why you set up your charts beforehand. Yeah, if we look at the 1 month chart, we can see it's slowly dropping. So that means that the rarest currency is going to get even rarer, and that the not so rare currency is not going to get as much as rare. So we could invest into the mirror, or we simply wait for these fluctuations, right? And this fluctuation, right, when the price is when the players is also at 10k or 9k, that is also the time in which the Divine Orb is most valuable, or all of the basic currencies that I talked about. And then we sell at these times. And even though it's not as big of a fluctuation as when we look at, for example, the beginning of this season, right, where you had fluctuations of 20,000 players, it's still a significant fluctuation, and we can use this to make some profit. And I wanted to put this into the patch note context, and if we look at the last patch that we cannot really see right here, let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, if you look at the recent patch, we had some patch notes about the omens being more. Oh, this is in German. I can't show this anyways. Yeah, I think I'll just blow that part out of the video because it's my personal Steam and it's not really that useful. But yeah, we can see that they have made certain omens, or they announced that certain omens are going to be less rare, which plummeted these omens in their relative price to everything else. And that meant that that was a prime time to buy those omens. So what I want to say with this is that we can watch out for any of the patch notes that announce a new currency that is going to be either less rare or more rare, because either of those two things are going to give us opportunities to invest, right? If, for example, an omen is said to be now way less valuable because it's way less rare, that means that everyone is going to panic sell even before the patch notes are released, right? And the prices can only recover from that lowest, since it is not made by the market really understanding what those omens are worth and how rare they really are, but just thinking that they are less valuable, and that be making them undervalued, right? And of course, if a currency is more rare, that means that the market is also going to absolutely explode. So if you are very early and you invest a lot, you can also profit a ton. So that's about the patch notes. And I think, and I hope that is all that I wanted to discuss for today. Of course, we already discussed invest into the Sinistral Null as soon as it hits its low, or you can do it right now, because right now the in-game prices are also not so bad, right? 3.65 or 3.75 is really not that bad. So yeah, go ahead and invest in those, in this currency, and the Omen of Sinistral Null, or into the Omen of Sinister Erasure, because it's also kind of undervalued right now. So either of those currencies, and of course, as every time, I say this every time, invest all of your currency into Chaos Orbs if you are doing no trading at all, because in the long-term development graph, it has the absolute best performance. So that's about it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed it, especially since I have been explaining a bit more, and I think I kind of struggled at some parts because English is not my first language, right? I hope you can excuse that. Go ahead and ask any questions if you got confused. And I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you very much for watching until the end, if you did that until now. And I'm out.